I really want to address this story. We got this tweet from Alex Stein, 99 primetime. He says, it was just a joke, dude. Stool Presidente, it's not that serious. Let me play for you what David Portnoy said. And there's some nuance to this discussion. But this is Alex Stein and his wife's boyfriend stormed into the Barstool Sports headquarters. Here's what was said.
And fucking slap him in the face. I don't think that guy's been slapped yet. So I'm glad he got slapped. Yeah. You hear people be like, oh, they should charge assault charge. He should have been shot. If we had a gun at front, a ski mask and a deranged homeless man trying to barge in, bang, bang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey,
that's
right.
The thing, it's the actor, which is
right.
The craziest part. Yeah.
Yeah. Bang, bang, you're dead. It's all those people who want that will be like, well, if you come into my house, I can shoot you with my gun. All right. Well, if you have two lunatics, a guy wearing a ski mask, bang, bang, and hey, fat Tabalar, bang. Sorry. We told you to leave. You wouldn't. They're all like, you leave. No, he didn't. Danny was like pushing him.
Yeah, no,
guy's like 900.
So where are they based out of? What city are they based out of? Is this New York or where are they at?
I think New York City. I think they're right in the middle of New York City.
I'm just going to say, first and foremost, Dave, you are wrong because, I'm sorry, if you're in New York City, can someone fact check real quick? Then you're wrong. No, if you're in New York City, you don't get to say someone should be shot.
Yeah, headquartered in NYC.
Yeah, if you're doing, but the show, like that, where they actually record?
I don't know.
If you're doing a show in a city where you constantly vote for and pay taxes and support the stripping away of your right to keep and bear arms, you don't get to say someone who entered a public office should be shot.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, we here in Western Maryland and West Virginia, with Castle Doctrine and active threats against us and armed guards, I will say there's a big difference. If someone stormed through, first of all, you got to enter a large property. You have to go past physical barricades saying, do not enter. You are being warned. You will be shot. Then if somebody broke in here, I'd be like, yeah, you'd probably get shot. I don't want you to get shot. I don't think you should be. You probably will be because we're not going to try and figure out your intention when you break in. But to stress, Alex Stein was joking. I'm not a big fan of storming into the podcast office, causing a fight and all that stuff. In a lot of circumstances, yeah, he'd get beaten up, he'd get arrested, all that stuff. But I just want to make sure I can point out, you can't say that when you're in New York City. Sorry.
There's also a difference in that. How many times have you been swatted? How many times have
15?
people actually? Yeah, I mean, is it really that high?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So it's like, yeah, obviously, that's a different level. I don't think Dave Portnoy is getting swatted all that much. The libs kind of like him. He plays this centrist character. And so it just seems a little over the top. I get that Alex Stein also is a little over the top, but I don't think blowing his brains out is totally proportionate here, I mean,
the thing is, they know who he is. They know, like if Alex Stein shows up, you're being pranked by a comedian with a comedian guy. Not saying I agree with it, but their office is also open. Like, I don't want to say it's open to the public, but you can just walk up and enter. It's like a building in a city. And so people are pointing out the fact that he was able to walk in the building, go through the door. There's no obstructions. There's no signs or anything. Well, yeah, guys, you got to get a guard and put up a sign saying, hey, private access only. These things won't happen.
Yeah.
I think that him saying it's a joke is a bit of a cop-out. I've been using the word cop-out a little bit too much lately, but I think it's not a joke. Jokes are words. You tell jokes, you say them. If you're doing something with your actions, that's something. It's a bit. Maybe it's an act, but it's not a joke.
Can I just want to point out too. You said he plays the centrist, but he's like the mirror version of centrism from where we are. Like he's a centrist on all the worst things. So like he talks about being pro-choice, but it's just because if he knocks a girl up, he doesn't want to deal with it. That's like the worst reason to be pro-choice.
Yeah, that was the argument he was making with Andrew Tate.
Right, exactly.
Andrew Tate's arguing with him against this? What kind of world are we living in? And when you live in New York City and you pay taxes in New York City, you're paying for 15-plus minute response times, not for your right to defend yourself. So if you want to defend yourself, obviously you have a right to do that. The question's blurred here. I mean, when someone jumps on your property, what do? I mean, the jurisdiction that he's in doesn't allow him to do anything.
It's not even his property. Yeah, I'm willing to bet, assuming that show was in New York. I don't know where Alex is based out of.
Alex Stein was in New York City when he did this.
Okay. So these buildings are multi-leased.
Yeah.
Right. So you're entering a building owned by someone who's not Barstool. Barstool rents this space. That's why he's able to walk through the halls and go in the elevator, because it's a community-owned thing. Yeah. Now you come out to West Virginia, where we got 50 acres of our property wrapped in a big old fence that says, do not enter. We will defend ourselves with lethal force. Very, very different circumstance. Plus, you know, you're in New York, bro. You can't have guns. So
Yeah.
I don't know what I think he just wants to be like, he shouldn't have come in here. He shouldn't have come in here. And I'm like, to a degree, I would say, yeah, he shouldn't have. But you're in a communal building. He's a prankster. People can just come and go as they please. I agree. It's probably over the top.
Isn't this also,
But shooting
though,
someone.
And this is a way that New Yorkers talk. I say this as a New Yorker myself. You know, it's always the hypothetical in the past. Oh, you know what I would have done? You know what I would have done if I had been there and I had seen that? Oh, I would have done it so bad. When it's just this guy, he's not going to.
He would have sat there like everybody else.
Of course.
I think Alex is taunting Dave. He's been taunting him for like a month and a half. And Dave finally, I mean, he went into his office and made a loud noise and smell, I'm sure. No, not that Alex smells bad, but you're letting your smell out, you know, your pheromones, bro. And Dave really took the bait. But him saying that you should have been shot, Alex, is a lot of people are going to hear that. And a lot of people are going to think, okay, if a guy comes into my office, maybe I should be shooting them. So that's a very bad thing. This is why you do not go Joker on people.
No, look, you just can't be a New York City liberal guy saying like, I'd shoot him. No, you wouldn't. You'd vote to ban guns. Come on.
But you know what's weird to me, though, about this is some conservatives really like Dave Portnoy. And he's not exactly my flavor of conservatism, but where did the bad blood start with Stein and Portnoy?
About a month and a half ago on Twitter, I think. Alex, it was real minor to be like, Dave, you smell. I don't know. What were the dumb tweets? I wish Alex was here to tell us.
I don't know. No, it started with something
simple.
specific that...
Really?
Yeah.
But it was like low key. It wasn't, but Alex really was like, I like this. I want the attention. I want to make a big deal out of it. It's good for me and Dave publicly. I think it was Alex's mindset.
Well, it's a publicity stunt.
No, but look, Alex Stein is a very, very smart guy.
Yeah,
We've had him on the show a couple times. Yeah. He's wild. He's obnoxious, but he is quick.
Yeah.
Like he comes up with these one-liners and these jokes. I'm like, the dude knows what he's doing and what he's talking about. He's got a plan.
Yeah.
The plan may be crazy. It may be a bit Jokerish, but Stein's a smart guy.
And he was like, Dave, I was joking, like earlier on, weeks ago, he's like, Dave, I'm joking around. Come on, let's have fun. And Dave was already he was angry at that point. And I haven't seen Dave cool down yet.
So what was it? Chrissy Mayer said they waltzed right in because your receptionist is dumb and buzzed them in. Is that what happened? Because if that's what happened, then Dave, sorry, you've lost every every argument.
Isn't there also a difference between if a guy busts in to my home at night or something, then if I can get a gun, I'll start blasting away. But if a guy comes into my office, well, I'll just take my producer Ben Davies and hold him right in front of me, and so he can take all the bullets or anything. But I'm going to go a little.
Ben Davies.
When the pandemic was heating up. There was a viral video out of, I think it was Los Angeles County or something, where a gun shop owner said, stop getting mad at me that I can't sell you guns. You voted for this. You voted for the wait periods. You voted for permitting. You cannot buy guns. It's your fault. People were showing up to gun shops being like, I'd like to buy a gun. He'd be like, okay, fill this form out, come back in a week. And they'd go, what? I need a gun now. And I'd be like, yeah, well, you voted for it or didn't vote at all. So to have these New York City liberals in a state that is a duty to retreat. I'm assuming New York is that way. New Jersey is that way. In New Jersey, if someone breaks into your house, you have to flee your own home. To where?
To Florida, Texas, and Tennessee.
They called it, right, exactly. They call it partial castle doctrine. I talked to a lawyer about it because someone tried breaking in, and he was like, if someone breaks in your house and there is any way you can escape, you have to. And I'm like, window? Yep. Door? Yep. Jump off the balcony. And he's like, within reason, obviously. But like, if you're in your house and someone goes to the front door, you got to go out the back. And I'm like, go where? Go to Dunkin' Donuts. And then call the cops. And then I'm just like, and if there are people trapped inside, and they're like, well, it's interesting, but depends on what they're going to argue. And what I was told is that the prosecutors in Jersey, of course, they will argue you did wrong, no matter what you did. So that's why I like West Virginia. West Virginia, someone breaks into your house. You defend yourself. The cops say, shouldn't have come into your house.
You get in trouble in New York City for having pepper spray.
Yeah.
Literally.
New
That's
York is
insane.
a duty to retreat.
I mean, I grew up in New York City too.
Oh,
It's not only a retreat; it's a retreat. Pull your pants down, bend over, and just take it. Because what else are you going to do, other than, of course, be a helpless victim? As criminals, there obviously have guns. Obviously, they have ways of getting guns with the Glock switches and everything. But you're not trusted enough to do that.
Is it because vigilante justice was out of control or something? Like, why did they make it? Why can't you just stop someone from coming into your house in New York?
I don't know,
That's a good question.
Yeah, well,
because when cops kick your door in, they don't want to be worried about it. The cops don't want to fear that if they serve a bunk warrant or enter the wrong house, they're going to get a shock reprisal. Because criminals are going to have guns anyway.
Didn't
So
Indiana pass a law saying that if a cop wrongly enters your home, you could legally defend yourself?
I think Ohio did too.
I think it was Indiana.
Yeah.
I saw Michael Malice tweeting about this, celebrating it.
Really?
He was very
There's
happy.
Malice.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
That's amazing. Because
me and Malice are both anarchists, just so you understand where we're coming from.
Yeah,
so that
listen.
could explain the debate we're having, which is great and awesome.
Well, I'll tell you too. I was saying this to Malice. I was saying this to some of my more kind of Ayn Randy friends because I don't like Ayn Rand. I went through a phase when I was a teenager. Really, I hate Ayn Rand. But the more that I live through COVID and post-COVID, the more that I see, I don't know, I'm going to wind up an anarchist. Somehow I'm going to wind up a trad anarchist, I think. Because, now, this is why it's also Dave's fault. If you are still conducting business in New York or LA, that's your fault. You had plenty of time to get out. You get out. Like, there's no reason to stay there.
West Virginia, man.
Forcing your will onto other people isn't cool. Being a statist and authoritarian is not cool.
Well, yeah, except for sometimes. Yeah.
No,
that's
no.
If they keep pooping in your water supply.
See, this is where I differ with also, the anarchist and libertarian friends of the show is that I look at jurisdiction, right? I've had the libertarians argue no borders. Borders are imaginary. Anarchists, borders are imaginary. And I was like, how do you protect your family if you don't set a perimeter to where you're allowed to live peacefully? Like, jurisdiction is actually setting a limitation on yourself. I actually feel that arguing for no borders is an extension of your authority over others.
Right.
When the United States says, this is our southern border, we're not going to go over there. Well, we do anyway, but the idea is, this is my property line. I'm not going to go over by you. This is where I'm going to do my thing. Please leave me alone. If we said borders don't matter, you're basically saying at any point I can go over by you and do what I need to do.
And also that's just an expression of the false anthropology at the heart of anarchism and libertarianism.
You guys are straw manning this. I just want to say for the record here, and it's
I'm not
far,
straw-
it's,
I'm making
it's
an
far more
argument.
complicated because we could get into details like welfare incentivizing people to move over. We could talk about the weaponization of immigration, and I think the Mises Caucus, especially under Dave Smith, has been addressing this issue in a very smart and correct way, addressing this immigration issue in a more correct way, saying, hey, as long as we have the welfare state, we shouldn't have open immigration.
But if you got rid of the welfare state, then borders should be erased or something. I mean,
well, it depends. It's a complicated argument, and there's many different factors that are multifaceted here. To me, anarchism, it's not an all-end solution to everything. It's never going to be perfect, but I think as humanity, we should always be striving for personal responsibility and for personal freedom and liberty.
And I agree to a great extent. My concern is the Communist Party of China exists. They've exerted authoritarian control over their people to the extent where they're welding them into their homes. We can be the anarchists of free trade and all that. And when the Chinese Communist Party comes knocking and says, we'd like to purchase some land in free trade, and we say, sounds good to us. Then before we know it, they own 40% of the farmland on the West Coast. And then all of a sudden they're using that against us, cutting off supply lines. We're being attacked from within, which means I'd love for you look at the United States, and Ron Paul made a great point that I love, where he said, in the U.S., you can be a socialist. Go buy land, go set up your little socialist commune. Why do you want to force everyone else to do that? We set the boundaries, we set the rules, we agree on those rules, and then we can live in peace and harmony.
we're also discussing these things as though they're opposites when they're communism and anarchism, when in fact they're two sides of the same coin because they partake of the same false anthropology, which says that the fundamental political institution is the individual, which is not true and has never been true. The fundamental political unit is the family. And so people are not born, as the Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment rationalists would have you believe, as individuals with a bunch of rights and entitlements, but primarily, though we do have rights, but we are born not as these atoms floating through space, but into families with duties and obligations. And so your love of your state and your love of your country is an extension of that filial piety because you have an obligation to respect your father and mother.
I think centralization is a big problem throughout human history. I think
But that's a different
decentralization. Essentially, this is what kind of boils down. But again, we're getting into larger ideologies.
But
Well, it's a balance of the two. You can't have authoritarianism or pure anarchy. You can't have pure either of the two extremes.
Yeah, I think right now it's more than fair to say that we are more centralized than ever, and we need more decentralization.
I see why you're pushing
and
back.
this is what the philosophy of anarchism is pushing, because right now I think it's fair to say that too many people in the central government have too much power over everyone else, and we need to limit that power.
And this is where we agree. And I think when you look at the political compass, the least populated portion of it is the center-left liberal. It's either far left, moderate authoritarian to very authoritarian, and then you have moderate conservative to like libertarian right.
Yeah.
And then you actually, I would argue, have more authoritarian right-wingers than you actually have center-left liberal libertarian types. It just doesn't exist.
I'm center-left lib.
But most people who claim to be are literally not. Most people who claim to be are authoritarian left, want speech policing to an extreme degree.
I was just told that that's what I was when I took the test.
But
I don't know what I am.
this is the point, and I'll get into the next story. The point is, if you are on the libertarian spectrum of the political compass, you still have a degree of authority that you expect to exist. Unless you're all the way on the bottom at anarchy.
Listen, we talked about this before. On a local small level, I forgot who said this. Someone more smarter than me said this. On a local family level, you should be communists. And then on a community level, you should be socialists. And then on a state level, you should move away further from centralization and call for more decentralization. And I agree. The family unit, I think, is one of the most important units. But I think we also have to respect the strongest minority of them all, and that's the individual. And you could still do that while, of course, prioritizing families, communities, and neighborhoods and individuals coming together to work together without any kind of mafioso, central controller, government bureaucrat coming in and getting a cut of the money.
No, but the trads love subsidiarity. I mean, that's a principle of, put forward by Thomas Aquinas and by conservatives since time immemorial. I think the place we're getting confused is we're pretending that individualism, the anarchists and the communists are opposites when they both accept the same fundamental premise, which I think is a wrong premise, which is that the individual is the primary unit of society. And so the anarchists say it's the individual and it has to remain that way, and the communists say it's the individual and that's why we've got to lump them all together. But it's the conservatives who are offering the only genuine alternative, which says, no, it's actually not about this individualism. It doesn't just come down to the individual. It comes down to something that is more institutional and actually fundamental to your humanity, which is family and community and tradition, and not just the use of your individual unfettered reason to come up with some cockamamie idea. It's why I think Karl Marx, if he were alive today, would be in the Tea Party or something.
I think
like
that's
I absolutely disagree with that in its total essence. And when we look at essentially what is boiling down to what a lot of these larger parties and ideas, especially when it comes to conservatives and what they're doing, they're essentially just kind of the liberals 10 years from now. When you look at the policies, when you look at them deciding to use force and government against other individuals to impose their ideas, I think at the end of the day, this is the key central role when anarchists and libertarians don't want a central figure, don't want someone telling them what to do. And I think this notion of back and forth, the government is good, they're going to tell us what to do right, they have the ultimate decision making and what is good and bad. I think that pendulum is when it swings back and forth between the left and right is only bringing on more government, more authoritarianism, and I think we need a lot less of that
right now. But Luke, do you not see the irony of lamenting that the wicked conservative authoritarians want to impose their views and use the power of the state on you, when what you are advocating is you're saying what we need to do, Michael, is we need to get rid of our political order in the United States, we need to get rid of tradition, we need to get rid of borders, we need to get rid of all of these things. What you are suggesting is a radical upending of our political order, at the very least. We're living in an anarchist utopia already.
No. It's not fair to put words in my mouth.
I'm just trying to figure out what you're saying.
I strongly believe in families. I think they should be prioritized, and I think individuals should treat families in a kind of communistic way on the individual basis without any kind of force or government intervening in that. This is why I'm a huge proponent of homeschooling. This is why I'm a huge proponent of moving away from depending on government for daily life.
What if the families
and personal responsibility?
What if the families abuse kids?
That's a horrible situation that needs to be mitigated
by the government.
That's a very hard decision. That's one example that is very hard to deal with. And again,
let me ask a question.
You're making this very niche kind of argument. But I could say, what about the government and the FBI raping small children and bringing them to small islands?
Let's keep the conversation in line and not go that far off. What if the government determines that not vaccinating your kids is abuse? And so the challenges that we have, and that point right there is why I say morality is not logical. Morality is amorphous. It's analog. It's not digital. We say something like, you shouldn't be allowed to abuse your kids. If a guy is beating his child, we should intervene and stop that. And then someone else says, you're right. And if you're not giving the kid the appropriate medical treatment for their disease, that's abuse. And then you ask the question, which medical treatment? Right. Are we talking about a vegan mom who's not giving her son any meat? And because she's determined what's right for her kids, and then we intervene? Or are we talking about, say, a gender transition program where the government says it's abuse if you don't give it to them? There's not a one-for-one answer.
The only, and I agree with that, of course. The only point I'm trying to make is that I find libertarianism and anarchism to be extremely authoritarian, in as much as they seek to impose a political order on me that I think is absurd and that I don't want. I don't want to live in a political order in which I, in a self-government, cannot, through my representatives and through the police force, take a child out of an abusive home. And a libertarian or an anarchist might prefer that, but that's not what I want, and so I find it very authoritarian.
But you would rather have a government and support a government and pay taxes to a government that's running international trafficking organizations.
Oh, come on.
No,
but if he's making an argument saying I support, but I can make the same argument there. I'm not.
No, I never said that.
Here's the ideal. The ideal is if a guy punches a kid in the face, we protect that kid and get it away from that person. If a guy's beating his wife, we get his wife out of there. But then there's a simple challenge. The law says you shall not cause physical harm to your children or your spouse, be it male or female. And then we say, that's a fine law. You cannot physically harm. And then someone goes, this woman was giving her kid an all soy diet with no protein, and he's sickly, anemic, and about to die.
We sort of have...
Do we intervene in that regard? But the mother says, I know what's right for my kid. Then we say, okay, you're right. She's abusing the kid. Then someone says, oh, but the government, Dr. Fauci says this vaccine has to be for kids, and the parent won't do it. Should the government then intervene? It's the same law,
right? And so,
but interpreted in different scenarios.
Traditionally, the American response to this is that we have a self-government. And to your point, Luke, very often it does not appear that we actually have a self-government increasingly. But notionally, that's the idea, at least. And so within this self-government, we have the right as citizens to come to answers on these questions and say, the all soy diet, that is abusive. You're not allowed to do that. The vaccine, no, we're not going to make you vaccinate your kids. And that's particular, but that does mean that we have the right to impose our views of the world on others. That is the premise and prerequisite of self-government. If you do not do that, then, well, you'll have to impose some other political order, which will get you right back to the same problem.
Let me ask you, Luke, if a kid had strep throat, bacterial, and the doctor said, we're going to, I don't know what the actual treatment is, amoxicillin? Do they still do amoxicillin?
Yeah, I guess.
And the mother says, no, I don't want any of that weird stuff. We're going to give him tree bark. Do you think the government should intervene or just let the kid die?
There's a lot of variables in that particular situation. So again, hypotheticals are not my favorite. I don't think it's fair to even issue a lot of those kind of hypotheticals.
Well, come on. Hold on there a minute. Answer the question, dude. Don't try and patter your way out of it.
I'm not pattering my way. I'm addressing the situation. I don't think it's a fair. I don't think it's a fair question. Now, obviously,
how is it not a fair question? A kid has a very simply curable bacterial infection, and the mom doesn't want to give him medicine. Should the government intervene?
At this instant, in this current situation, the government will intervene.
But no,
should
the intervene?
I don't have all the answers here.
This is the challenge when I start thinking about how, yes, I want to be much more libertarian. I don't like vaccine mandates. And when we say something like, look, I've had, when I was a kid, strep throat or whatever, and they gave me that pink stuff that tasted really, really great. It was like strawberry flavored amoxicillin or something. And it cures you. We know antibiotics cure diseases.
Shout out to fungus.
So if I see a parent who's like, I'm going to rub crystals on my kid, I'm like, well, look, I don't like the idea that the government can come in and tell a parent how to raise their kid. That's a big problem. But there's also, oh man, what do you do? We know that antibiotics can cure certain diseases. How do we navigate this when Dr. Fauci says you must do this for your kid, even if it's like, we're in phase 3 trials and it's only been a couple of years. At that point, you're like, I object, but it's this at the core. The nuance of the situation is different, but it's the same thing. Do I accept the government can intervene when a person defies the science? Man, now I'm watching a kid die of strep throat when I know we could save his life because I don't want someone to be forced to inject their kid over here. I don't have the answer for that.
Well, there's also there's a difference between amoxicillin and the Fauci ouchie. We have a lot more long-term data on one of those than the other. But also to your point, can the government do this? There is an historical matter here, which you've pointed out, Luke, which is that throughout all of human history, in every single society, in every single place on planet Earth, the government, by which we mean people having power within political communities, do impose those things. Every single place. Occasionally, anarchists will say, in 8th century Iceland or something. But okay, fine. But everywhere for all of human history. Yeah,
Well,
right. Yeah.
If you look at government interventions, I mean, again, anarchism doesn't have all the solutions, doesn't have all the answers, and I do believe children should always be protected. Obviously, that should be a common.
No. Hold on.
Common sense answer. But hold on.
Wait, if you make a point, I've got to address the point. You can't,
okay, but this is the larger point that I wanted to make here. I'm not finished here. I'm laying down the groundwork for this point.
But you don't agree with that. You don't think kids should always be protected.
It depends on the circumstances and situations. I don't want to be the central controller deciding a lot of these things. A lot of these things will be decided by individuals or communities or families and neighborhoods that will decide for themselves what is right. And I believe at the end of the day, that is a better thing that will happen rather than a government coming in and taking a kid and putting him into CPS.
What is the difference?
Look what happens at CPS. Look at how horrible our CPS system is. Look at how many kids get hurt inside of the CPS system.
I have a question.
So all I'm saying is at the end of the day, I don't have all the answers and solutions here. No one does. Obviously, there's flaws in every single political argument and political ideology. Yes, obviously. But at the end of the day, individuals should decide for themselves, not central controllers.
So let me ask a simple question. 2 circumstances. Government says we will not intervene in what the family decides to do with their child. The family then decides they will sterilize and castrate their kid and give them hormones. Second scenario.
You mean what they're doing right now with the state protection?
Second scenario. Family says we will not give this kid hormone therapy and surgery, and the government does intervene.
Right.
Which one's the right or wrong one? Do we say the government should not intervene in the parent's decision as they decide to give their kid what they deem best, a sex change? Or do we stop the government from forcing the sex change because the child wants it and the state deems it to be caring?
Taking responsibility away from yourself, taking decisions away from the family, from the community is, to me, a recipe for disaster.
So here's
this is what I'm arguing against. That's my main argument.
Do you think
not some emotional argument about kicking a baby?
If a mother and father publicly announce that their child of 12 wants to be castrated and injected with hormones, should we just say that's your choice as a parent?
I think that should be pushed back against in many different ways. That's a horrible decision. That's going to hurt the child, and I think there should at least be informed consent and some community involvement.
How can there be informed consent for the kid?
Well,
this is the thing. Kids should always be protected. This is where I disagree with a lot of the bigger kind of libertarian and anarchist ideas, especially when they say we got to sell heroin to kids. Obviously, that's the wrong idea. Obviously, that's something that I stand against, and I made clear many times before on this particular show. But when it comes to these important decisions, at the end of the day, I do believe, and I have a lot more faith in a family, in a community, in the neighborhood, and in individuals rather than the big government that we have now that uses our tax dollars in horrible ways and hurts way more people than the larger ideologies of anarchism, which I believe at the end of the day would lead to less harm reduction.
I just wanted to say that scenario I gave of the parents are doing it and the government doesn't intervene, and the parents don't want it and the government does intervene, exemplifies my point about how laws are based on amorphous morals, analog morals. Like, in which circumstance do we decide the government is or isn't right?
Also the interpretation of intervention here is, I think, problematic because the government, by which, and Luke, you keep conflating these things where you say, well, no, I don't like the government, I just like community. Well, the government is the expression of the political community, especially in a notionally self-governing republic.
Especially now with what's happening with the elections? Especially now with the way that they're running things?
Well, certain elections are an expression.
But we're falling
Maybe
apart.
not Maricopa County.
Yeah, especially now with how much debt they put us in, especially now with the threat. I mean,
the national debt is an expression of the political community making choices. Absolutely.
This is how I drift more away from anarchism and libertarianism. I recognize sometimes we want the government to intervene and sometimes we don't. And there's no way to define it other than a judgment.
It just seems
by a
to
trusted
me,
person.
It seems to me the government is always intervening in the sense that we live in a society, we live in a political community. In order to live together in a society, we come up with rules and norms and institutions to mediate the people in that society, the families and the.
But why can't communities do that? Why do you need a government to do that?
That is what a government is. This is the expression of the expression and force of a political
I think that's
community.
been highly bastardized and highly incorrect with the way the government is now.
You're talking about federal government and large government. right? You're advocating for smaller, localized government.
I'm talking what essentially is a mafia coming in there and saying, I will impose my will on you because I know what's best for you. I'm against those ideas.
When we're talking about, let's just use the term political community then, which I think is actually more precise. Within a political community, there is always a way that people are living and being raised. So, for instance, if the mode of education within the political community says that men and women are different and men can't become women and women can't become men, then I guess you're not going to have these kids getting castrated and injected with poison. But is that the government intervening? I just think this idea that the government is active or passive is no, the government just is. The political community just is, and we're always constantly living in a state of standards and norms. And so the question is not this procedural question is, will the government do something or not? The question is just, what is the government doing?
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.